All right, thank you everyone for being here today. I know this was short notice, so I do appreciate you hustling over here and documenting this for us. We're here today to announce charges against the arsonist who started the line fire. With us today, we have San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson. We have San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes and 3rd District Supervisor Don Rao. I'm going to turn it over to District Attorney Jason Anderson to give an overview of our conference.
Thanks, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. I am Jason Anderson, the District Attorney for the County of San Bernardino. And as Jackie indicated, we filed charges this morning on Mr. Holstenberg as a result of what's known as the line fire. We've filed a total of 9 charges. I'll go through most of those in some specificity. We have a PowerPoint presentation that'll run to make it a little bit easier to understand what the context is for the different charges. First off, I do want to thank the Sheriff's Department. I want to thank CAL FIRE for their joint investigation and how quickly they were able to bring this case to us, be able to file charges. I want to let you know and remind the public that this is an ongoing crime. The fire is still burning, and so things could change throughout the development of this fire, whether additional people are injured or whether additional structures are burned. It will be an ongoing investigation, just aware that some things will change. I specifically want to thank other members of law enforcement who have backed up the Sheriff's Department as it relates to giving aid to communities that have had to be evacuated when the community has to leave their homes. Unfortunately, sometimes that can lead to opening it up to other types of crime. The Sheriff's Department has been all over that. Other agencies within San Bernardino County have given mutual aid to that, and so hopefully that's a reassurance to the members of the community that while they're worried about their homes and they're getting into safety, that they don't have to worry about something else happening to their house, and fortunately that it doesn't burn down. So let me go through the charges a little bit. So we have a total of 9. The first charge obviously is an arson charge that is in regards to over a particular amount, over $7 million. That's significant because at last calculation, CAL FIRE had the damages so far at about $14.5 million worth of damages that have occurred at the line fire. It's up to over 34,000 acres is my understanding. Count 2 involves great bodily injury of a firefighter who was injured. Obviously, that's something that we contemplate. Unfortunately, we've seen in the past as fires in this region continue to be a scourge that we've had firefighters die. In this instance, we have not had that happen, thankfully, but at least in one instance, we've had a firefighter suffer great bodily injury. Count 3 involves a particular residence in Running Springs that was confirmed burned down as a structure fire. When you're dealing with arson types of cases, those are the things that are most significant because that has the most impact on the public. Additionally, on our complaint, there are charges of 3 separate incendiary devices. And the reason I'm talking about 3 separate incendiary devices is that what you're talking about, and we'll show you through the map in a second, is there's actually 3 different arsons that occur. There's what we characterize as one in one area, and there's a 2 and a 3 right next to each other. The third one that we delineate is the one that's still burning, known as the line fire. So there was arson that occurred at 2 other spots, the fire that continues to burn at the 3rd spot, incendiary devices found in those instances. So going forward, obviously, as I said, it's going to be an ongoing investigation.
We'll go back to the map here.
Yeah. So what you see on the screen there is a map of where we're talking about. Number 1 is where the first instance of arson occurred. We refer to it as kind of the Bacon fire because it's a Bacon Street. That's one area. And then when we look at the other slide, it should show where 2 and 3 are. So that's a little bit east of where the Bacon fire was, and 2 marks where a fire was started. It was put out. 1, a fire was started and it was put out. And then 3 is the fire that continues to burn. And based upon the investigation, in terms of the charges, the suspect's vehicle was in or around all of those areas at times in which the fires were started. Obviously, the sheriff went over, and he can answer more questions today, but he went over yesterday in terms of the identification of the defendant's vehicle, which was very, very helpful in pinpointing the times and the locations of when the fire were started. So I didn't go through all the charges, and the reason I didn't do that is some of them are going to overlap a little bit when you're talking about different instances of arson. As I said, because it's an ongoing investigation, things could change. We're continuing in the investigatory stage, obviously dealing with additional evidence that the Sheriff's Department has seized that will be helpful. The Sheriff can answer any questions about that if there's any new developments on there. But I want to caution the public that we want to make sure that the community understands that we are filing charges, and based upon the evidence we have thus far, the charges that we are filing. I think we also want to reassure the community that, you know, arson is, in my experience in the criminal justice system for over 23 years, arson is just one of those crimes that is, to me, unbelievably despicable because it's a head scratcher. There's no value to be had out of arson. You light a match, you start a fire, there's nothing to be gained unless there's some unbelievably particular fetish about watching other people's homes burn down or people get injured. And so that's why this is particularly galling in a community that unfortunately over the last couple of years has dealt with the scourge of wildfires in this particular area, overcoming what happened in the El Dorado fire, people recovering from that, only to come back and have this done at a standpoint of arson. Obviously, two different types of cases that we're talking about there, but we're on it. And I want the public to know that, in particular with these types of cases, it's not the type of situation where we look at it and go, well, you know, we hope that the fire gets out. And we do. It's going to be out, and we hope that no one else gets injured and that no other homes burn. But that doesn't take away from the irreplaceable feeling that regardless of what we're able to do in court on this case, with an ultimate conviction and a sentence that a judge may hand down, is you're never going to be able to replace the feelings of despair by somebody having to literally run away from their most important possession, their greatest capital investment, with all the nuances, the real and memories in a home that they may lose, and not know how to replace it, and not know how their loved ones are or their neighbors are. And so that's why I was so appreciative of the Sheriff's Department getting all over this to begin with, because it's a multifaceted thing when you're trying to save lives and save structures, but understand what's the point of origin. So it's a credit to them, it's a credit to CAL FIRE, it's a credit to my colleagues in this office who have been reviewing reports for 2 days, to be able to make determinations that in each one of these 9 instances that we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And I can assure the public that we're going to go hard on this case, that we're going to be resolute on this case. And again, it's a developing situation that we hope does not get any worse. But if it does, and we think that it warrants charges, then we will likely file amended complaints and go forward with what we believe that we can prove. So, Jackie, I think that's all as it relates to. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Dykes if there's any additional questions. And obviously at the end, if there's any questions about the process, I'm happy to answer those. So Sheriff, why don't you go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Shannon Dykes. I'm the Sheriff of San Bernardino County. We're in day 8 of this fire. And the complexity of an arson investigation when you're talking about forensics, that's both technical forensics and determinate police work, I could not be more proud of CAL FIRE and the detectives out of the Highland Station to be able to bring this to the DA. But one thing I'd like to relate to all of you, this is not the first time I've stood before you in this room. And I think it's pertinent for the public to know that we have prosecutors and we have a DA that realize law enforcement is not just a 9-to-5 job. They're embedded with us, and they had to be embedded with us in this investigation to be able to turn these charges as quickly as they did. And that's credit, Jason, to you and your staff for being good partners. And in this county, we charge people and we hold people accountable. When you talk about the people that have been disrupted, their lives, we talk about the charges being filed for property damage and also injuries to first responders. We have to remember that this is still an evolving incident as well. We don't know what's going to happen. We know the containment on the line fire is increasing, but there's still a potential for more people to be disrupted and, heaven forbid, anybody to be injured or killed. So how do you say, Sheriff, with confidence you know this? I can say it with confidence because I'm here with 3rd District Supervisor Dawn Rao. She's our current chair of the Board of Supervisors. She's embedded in these communities. You've seen her day in and day out trying to find out what our citizens need all the way up through late last night being involved in a community meeting. And what I'd like to do is bring up Dawn and let all of you know what we've been dealing with in the community and what San Bernardino County is doing for our citizens. Dawn?
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Sheriff. I represent the entire area of where the line fire is impacting our residents, and our Office of Emergency Services, in conjunction with all of our first responders, are doing what they can for our residents who have evacuated under the mandatory warning and orders now. And we are sheltering them. We have 2 different shelters where we are taking care of them and their pets. So if you need assistance and services, we can provide them through the Red Cross up in our Victorville shelter, as well as the Jesse Turner shelter in Fontana. They have everything that you need there. As this fire evolves, we will work to repopulate those residents who have been evacuated, and we will also have an assistance center on what they can do for filing claims if they've experienced any losses. And so all those will be evolving as the fire winds down. But as both the district attorney and the sheriff said, this is still an active fire. There are still threats to our residents, their structures, and so we will remain steadfast in our resolution for declaring this a state of emergency. Governor Newsom has also done the same at the state level, which will help us submit for reimbursement, and it also helps get us assets here to help with the fire currently. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. So as you have imagined, this is all an ongoing investigation. We just filed charges within the last hour. The defendant is due for arraignment tomorrow. The location and time is to be determined, and I will include that in your press packets afterwards. But right now I wanted to turn it over if you had any questions, but please do understand it is an ongoing investigation. We will answer what we can. Go ahead.
I saw the community meeting last night, and when the question was raised about the Keller's Peak Lookout Fire Tower, the gentleman from one of the departments that was talking was choked up. And I imagine that feeling is felt across the community. I'm wondering if one or a couple of you wouldn't mind talking a bit about the impact of this fire on their emotions, knowing that this allegedly was not a naturally occurring event.
Sure. No, that's a great question. When we specifically talk about Keller Peak, it has a number of interests to all of us, even those of us in public safety and, of course, the community. Why did they get choked up? It's a fire tower that has historic connections to that community. Back in the days before the technology that we're all familiar with today existed, whether it's camera technology or fire sensors of things of that nature, there was a person that manned that tower, and that's what protected that community. So you can only imagine with the disruption and the emotions that come up with that, and that historical connection about what was put in place to protect, and to see that actually go down in the event of fire and what that tower was meant to protect the community from, it's certainly something that's emotional for them. On the public safety side, because that tower was existing, you can imagine, and all of you have been with us for the last week seeing the rugged terrain that's there, communication towers and things they were actively using to fight the fire. When that tower burned, we actually lost communications with some of our fire department briefly. Thank God they're so amazing at doing the job they did. It was easily for them to shift gears and stand up a different communication system. But I think that's why you're seeing that emotional impact from all of us. And last night, you saw that from a firefighter who's also a resident, so they've got a foot in both camps as it relates to the history of that tower. But excellent question. Rob, go ahead.
Can you, I know there's a lot you can't talk about because it's ongoing investigation, but can you help kind of connect the dots between these 3 charges? I mean, it sounds like, was he all that same day trying to set a fire, didn't take off, so he tried to do it again, didn't take off, and then a 3rd time, or these 3 incendiary devices, and one of them worked? Can you just help the narrative on that a little bit, what happened?
Sure. So we do believe all 3 of those are related to the suspect that we've had arrested, and it does look like those fires were starting. Some of the things that helped us in this, and I mentioned it in an earlier press conference, were the automated license plate readers, but also different people who saw those fires and made calls. So when we compress the information in terms of time frame with the hits on the automated license plate reader, that's one of the things that led us to the possible suspect, and of course ultimately identifying the vehicle first and then the suspect secondarily.
And these were all kind of right around the same time, all
Yep.
3 of these starts?
Yes, sir.
So they are all connected to the line fire. There's nothing related to the other 2 fires that are burning.
Yes, and I'm so glad you asked that, because when you were talking about this, what the DA is filing right now is all related to the line fire. Even though as a county, especially those of you that have been following the Sheriff's Department, we've got a foot in both camps in both fires right now. But yes, these charges are specifically related to the line fire. And all three of those events, we believe, based on evidence, are connected to this arsonist.
What's the maximum exposure for this guy if he is convicted?
Count one would cover 10 years to life, and then the other additional counts would be determinate terms that possibly could get up to 11 years. So you could do an indeterminate term, depending on perhaps when you were to get out, but then you would have to do the additional 11 years. So it's a high charge. It's still one of the areas in California where there's actually some teeth in the penal code, thank goodness. And it's because of the financial loss, it's the loss of the home, and it's the injury to the firefighter.
And the extent of the injuries to the firefighters, can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, was it minor injuries?
Well, it's great bodily injury. It's we're indicating in the discovery is that it's a broken ankle.
Is there, I know, and maybe the sheriff can handle this, I know that there's no one from the fire department here, but can you at least give us kind of an update on how things are going? I know the weather's getting a lot better. Yesterday, no additional evacuation orders were put in place. In fact, some of them were downgraded to warnings, so that gives us the sense that things are improving.
No, and Rob, that's a great question. So we're still at about 18% containment on the line fire, but exactly what you just relayed, it is stable at this moment. You heard a lot of talk, whether you're at the community meeting or a number of our other press conferences, about the plateau. We're all worried about, this traveling into Big Bear. It looks like what the U.S. Forest Service put into play is holding in the manner in which they expected. So rather than the fire at this point going directly into Big Bear, it's moving a little bit more east. Of course, at this point, it looks like it's protecting that community. So the reports that I'm getting officially are that we're really holding our own at this point on the line fire, and I think we're going to see, as long as we don't have any dramatic wind changes or weather changes as a whole, that you'll be able to see our firefighters start increasing that containment percentage.
Could you give us a sense of emotionally whether there's increased frustration knowing that you guys aren't out there just trying to stop something that was caused by nature, but that this was allegedly intentionally sent by someone? I know I talked to someone up in Running Springs and it just brought him to tears. He's like, I should be at work, and now I'm having to protect my home because someone wanted some entertainment.
Last night at that community meeting, we had a chance to meet with a lot of folks from the Running Springs area, which in our mountains is probably the most impacted by the line fire. And to see the number of residents and those that own businesses, and some of them are niche businesses. I talked to one specific citizen last night who owns a woodworking business. They make their money by being able to work in that shop in Running Springs and, of course, ship their wares. They are concerned about, the next amount of money, the next paycheck, so to speak, about where that's coming from. Last night, in seeing the flood of firefighters, law enforcement personnel, and San Bernardino County as a whole throwing everything we have at them, one lady came up and gave me a very long hug while she was crying, but not only related it to the fire that's going on now, but Snowmageddon that they just got through. So we have to understand that these people are emotionally impacted and traumatized almost back to back. And they are very thankful, and I think it gives a sense of justice and some sense of relief, especially if you think about, hey, is another fire going to start up again tomorrow as you capture suspects like this? And it just takes a little bit of that security and puts it back into their pockets, so to speak, that there is some justice for this. And there is accountability, and this isn't just an anomaly. And I'm very thankful as the sheriff. We don't always have this happen. It is very difficult to be able to get the evidence and to do these things, to be able to bring some of these fires that we believe are arson to justice. But as technology gets better, as our citizenry that is obviously lives here become more and more aware of what's going on, those are the things that really contributed to the success of this case. And we do have emotionally impacted folks on our mountain and also in the Highland area. And because of our unique topography, I mean, you can be in a very urban area and look how fast this fire traveled to really very densely populated communities up there. And these communities are very popular communities. When you were in Southern California, it's one of the few places you can go snow skiing and turn around an hour later and be in a place like Dana Point and go surfing. This is the brilliance of California, and the San Bernardino Mountains are really the exclamation mark on that.
Can you say anything about the suspect if we heard that he admitted to it, but if you maybe can confirm that, if he's cooperating with you guys and if there's a motive behind this?
Yeah, I don't have any of that information yet, not because I'm trying to be vague with you. I can tell you that the evidence, just the evidence alone presented this, we have a significant certainty that this is our suspect, and just by the fact that the DA's reviewed that evidence and reviewed our reports, that they have a similar certainty.
You said he used an incendiary device. Is there any way of elaborating, like was it a cigarette butt? Did he have a lighter or something?
Now that's a great question. As much as I'm up here wanting to tell you what that is, that piece of this will be the key to help us determine, really, a lot of these folks that do arsons, I'll call it a signature, and we'll be able to determine in the future as to whether or not maybe they were involved in other things, and that evidence could be the piece that brings more charges in the future. But that's the one reason we won't release it, because right now the only people that know that are the investigators and the arsonist himself.
When you say signature, could that possibly mean that he could be connected to other prior fires?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one thing we'll check, and I can tell you, once we have certainty that that's the case, we will absolutely bring this back to you. I know the DA and I will be talking about this together, and if it's here in San Bernardino County and it's appropriate to bring those charges, we'll do that.
So could you, and I apologize, I'm just trying to kind of get to the bottom of that part. So without having to divulge all the details, obviously, with this investigation, are there certain things that you're seeing that could connect to other prior fires that you're seeing with how the line fire started specifically then?
Well, as far as that, I don't know. But so when I talk about forensics and technological forensics, ALPR readers, we're going to go back and check those types of databases and do that time correlation study and see if we can put this person in the area. And then if there are reports of arson and other arson investigators have documented those cases, there's a high likelihood we're going to see that same signature. Does that make sense?
Is it possible he's been doing this a number of years?
It could very well be, Rob, and I don't know that at this point, but it's certainly significant arson behavior.
And just to clarify then, based on what these questions were, yesterday at the arrest announcement, you did say that you think evidence will show he was involved in other fires. Are you referencing the other two fires that erupted?
No, not at this point. Not at this point. I think it's that what makes me feel confident about that is obviously some of our investigative techniques that we're able to do and that still need a lot further investigation. But it is that signature that we were just speaking about. It is somewhat unique. And in this case, just the line fire charging, evidence that was related at the scenes that the DA described to you, and search warrants that we conducted, that's how we were able to put this together.
Can you talk a little bit about the usefulness of the automatic license plate readers? Because I know that they've been around for years, and I think other arsonists have been caught by this same manner. And explain to the public kind of how that works.
Sure. That's a great question, Rob, and this is one of the most critical pieces to technology. When you're talking about any type of jurisdiction, it could be a city, it could be our local mountains, but anytime we capture plates and then you can correlate time to an event happening, you automatically are able to build a potential suspect base. So you can look back, and it's just a matter of really shrinking that down and getting that time component closer and closer. So then you go out and you do gumshoe cop work with that data, and you start interviewing people. You find out whether or not they were in that area, those types of things that really help us. But when you talk about just time correlations of crime in general, and our cities as they implement these things, as they're implemented on police cars and you're driving around, we could very well catch an armed robbery suspect on a license plate reader of a police car, but not yet know they're the armed robbery suspect. And then when we do the time correlation, actually pick up that plate, and it develops those leads for us to land on our suspect, much like what happened in this case.
So you can basically find, go to that license plate reader that's just all constantly churning through license plates and say, okay, we have a fire start here, fire start here, fire start here, and there's a plate that is in common with all three locations, and that can be a method to help find someone.
Rob, you're hired. No, you're absolutely right, and that is how they use it. But also, automated license plate readers can be used for us proactively. For instance, when there is a car that's stolen, putting them into the database, having those cameras identify that that car just passed through there. Again, time correlation, put those officers in the right place, and hopefully recover people's property.
Thank you,
What
Sharon.
about the idea about just the fact that, this is one of many fires that we've seen over the years, and what is it, I think CAL FIRE said 80 to 90% are human caused. These are things that could be preventable, and then now we're seeing stretched resources, resources stretched thin across California. Can you maybe speak to that and how it's preventable, and yet, obviously this was intentional by this guy, but there's other times where it's accident, but it's still human caused.
Oh, absolutely. It could be just something simply, you see something on the side of the road you want to take a picture of, and you forget the catalytic converter on your car is hot, and you pull into weeds, and it kicks off a fire. It's really all of us being conscious of what we deal with here in California, specifically Southern California, as it relates to weather patterns, and really just the vast amount of resources and visitation. We can talk about fires, we can talk about hiking. There are so many people that come in and out of our area. The population that surges, particularly on the weekends in San Bernardino County, is significant because we have so many rich resources, whether it's our mountains or whether it's our deserts. So we see that regularly, and so we as individuals have to be careful to accidentally spark those types of things off. And then, of course, where we can certainly be proactive and putting that information out. You hear the fire chiefs all talk about fire safe councils, clearing space around our homes. That's how we help. Thank you, everybody. Jackie?
So, real quick, I wanted to clarify, and I appreciate the sheriff going into it and the questions in regards to other fires that are not the bridge fire or any other fires. I want to be very clear in terms of our filing on this case. It's based upon evidence of the line fire. There's no indication, there's no thought process in terms of our filing decision that is considering perhaps any other type of fire previously that may be connected to this individual. We're not basing our filing decision on this case on any of that stuff. We don't have any information in regards to that as it relates. So I don't want anybody in the public to think that we're trying to bootstrap something here because of information we may or may not have on another fire. It's based upon the investigation that the sheriff talked about. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that it's interesting that Rob asked the question about LPRs. There's been efforts in this state through the legislature to reduce the resource that LPR readers can be to law enforcement. Luckily, that's never passed. I don't think there's a member in San Bernardino County in Highland community that would ever be in favor of limiting LPR readers for law enforcement. And this is one of the reasons it's such a big tool in a lot of different areas. Not only the safety of individuals in intersections and being able to determine, is there a distinction between a simple accident as it relates to a car accident? Is there recklessness, or in this instance, is there intent?
Can I ask you this? Is it fair to say that without automatic license plate readers, this guy wouldn't be in custody?
That would be a component that would be, there's great value in that in this instance, yes. Yeah.
Given the efficacy of this, are you guys talking about adding more of these systems in place in the future?
Well, I think there's sufficient systems. I think the issue is that the debate between civil liberties and the value to law enforcement and being able to do investigations. LPRs, they only reveal what everybody else knows is going on anyway, people driving around in the public. But, as we've had sort of a battle back and forth in this state about criminal justice, this is an instance in which when we argue in favor of LPRs, it's not because law enforcement wants to know everything you're doing all the time. It's when things really go south, like it's done for the community of Highland in this county as it relates to the line fire. This is the value in it. And sometimes it's hard to articulate that to individuals who haven't lived through what many of our residents in this county have lived through over the last couple years. I believe the fire that killed all the firefighters, was that a decade ago, Simon? Yeah. Yeah, the Esperanza fire, LPRs, is unbelievably helpful in that instance. So
in this case, it was LPRs and then witness statements
both
corroborated.
And yes, LPR, witness statements that corroborated, even witness statements that would have put the suspect in the area without the LPRs. The LPRs with the corroborating evidence, and as the sheriff said, you've just got boots on the ground that are literally doing what detectives and investigators do, is they're putting it all together as he described before. So
witness statements are just, oh, it's a white truck or whatever. LPRs actually get you a license plate.
Yeah, it does, but it certainly helps to have an individual who has a vested interest in the community, who's seeing that, hey, there's a fire here, and then is able to come forward to law enforcement without knowing the value of an LPR to have corroborating evidence that, hey, it looks like this is not checking out, giving a description of the vehicle, and it turns out it's corroborated by some of the scientific evidence.
Was there any other surveillance video that you guys had obtained from residents?
That's all in the works. Again, as we said, it's an ongoing investigation. We're 8 days into this. The gentleman was arrested yesterday, right? And so, you know, that's all in the works. So they are still combing through all of that stuff. But obviously, we had sufficient evidence before us to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why we made a filing decision. But it is ongoing, and it will develop.
And 10 years to life is fair to say. I mean, I know it's complicated. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if convicted of all charges, he could get.
Yeah. He could get 11 years and then start 10 to life. Yeah, is the way it goes. And it's the count one because of it's the financial damage that's been done to the county. That's where you really have the teeth in that arson. And then what doesn't merge would be obviously a separate structure, which is the one in Running Springs that we reference in our complaint. That's going to be punished separately, and then the injury to the firefighter would be punished separately. So you can start to stack that a little bit. So that gives you a range. Obviously, ultimately, that's a judge's determination, but that kind of gives you the ballpark on that, and it's probably a little bit more conservative. But you know, that's not a concern of ours. That just is something that'll naturally occur upon a conviction in this case. But that gives you the range, Rob. Hopefully that helps.
Go ahead.
One quick thing. Rob, I wanted to go back to your question about how the residents feel knowing that there's an arsonist. I will tell you that it's exceptionally frustrating, but there's a sense of pride in our county knowing that we have law enforcement partners in our sheriff and CAL FIRE who are doing everything that they can to secure these suspects, and then a district attorney who is willing to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. And that is something that is unique to our county, where we all work so well together, and really to have someone who is strong against crime. So it gives us the sense of pride that we have in San Bernardino County.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank again our partners here, and thank you all for being here and helping us inform the public. I will be available afterwards. The complaint will be available. This presentation will be available to you. And if you have any further questions at that point, you could reach out to me. But thank you so much for your time.